Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah, and this week's Parashat is the 7th Parashat of the book of Bereshit, also called Genesis, and it's called Vayetze, which means, and he went out. And this week's Parashat starts in Genesis, or Bereshit 28:10 through 32:3, with the half-Torah in Hosea, or Hosea 12:12 through 14:9. And my message for 2014-15 is called Fighting Over the Fruit. And this is going to be a 10-minute summary of the complete message, which is an hour-long message. And you'll be able to click the link to listen to that one if you want, or you can listen to the summary. Anyway, my message is called Fighting Over the Fruit. And in this week's Parashat, of course, we start off with all these things. We get Yaakov having the dream about the ladder going up to heaven. We get the setting up the pillar, and then we have Rachel and Leah, and kind of the story of him going to the well and finding Rachel, and then going back and what will my wages be? He sets up his wages with Lavan to work for Rachel for 7 years, and he gets tricked and given Leah. And then we have all the children of Israel being born through Leah, Rachel, who was barren at first, and then we have the handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. So, and then we finish off with them fleeing away from Lavan chasing after them, and then we get the half-Torah. So, anyway, my message is called Fighting Over the Fruit, and the key concept there is that that people have been fighting over the fruit or what comes out of things. They're fighting over the rewards. They're fighting over Mashiach. They're fighting over the Bible. They're fighting over the promises of the Bible with different religious groups and all of that. Everybody's fighting over the fruit, and they're fighting even over whether or not, literally, whether you have to obey the Torah or whether you have to produce fruit. Or not. And so we see this illustrated in all these stories. And we see this from the very beginning, where we have the ascending and descending on the ladder. This is the contrast of going up, being exalted, being brought down low, being heavenly, being earthly. These are the patterns that we see. And we see that Yaakov thinks that he's at the gate, basically, of heaven. Or door, and we know that Mashiach says that he is the door. So all these things, he is also the Word of God. So the Word of God is that deciding factor between whether you're ascending to heaven or whether you're being brought low to earth. And we see that there's this constant fight in our choices, and that's what the Torah teaches us, how to make the right choices. They teach us what is wicked and what is righteous, what is good and what is evil, and the encouragement is that we choose good. And then we get to Yaakov setting up the pillar and the stone, putting oil upon it that he had laid his head upon. And I talk a little bit about the concept of what the rock represents in the scriptures, and it represents truth, or a thing that's established or hard and solid, and then what is that? Oil is that spirit. And so when we put that spirit upon the truth, it really talks about having both, because what we get is we get a contrast with Leah and Rachel, also known as Rachel. We get this contrast where he doesn't necessarily love Leah, but she bears fruit, and then he has Rachel, who he loves, that is bearing no fruit. And I kind of contrast this to different groups, religious groups and teachings, whether or not, like with Judaism, where you have the commandments, but in some ways they take it too far into tradition and almost going through the motions for the sake of going through the motions. And sometimes I think they get to the point where they've found a way to basically, they've talked themselves out of the commandment, or they've even missed the point of it entirely. And then you have Christianity in many cases where they have the opposite. They have this great desire and all that, but then they have no fruit, because they essentially teach that you don't have to keep the commandments, and they remove all that part. And so we see in this love story of Israel that we have these two different extremes. And the big question is, where do you rest your head? What is the foundation of your faith? And what are you there for? Are you there to say that you're the promised or the chosen people? Are you there for rewards? Are you there for forgiveness or salvation? Or are you there to obey God and to figure out whatever that means and do that? Because though everybody would say that that's what they are interested in, that's not really the foundation of their faith. And so I get into that a little bit. Also, next we talk about the flocks of Lavan, and basically the concept of how all this blessing that comes to Yaakov comes ultimately, starts with Lavan, whether it be his flocks or his daughters or his wealth, and yet Lavan was worshiping idols, and he was a trickster and trying to get something for nothing, and all these things. So eventually Yaakov has to separate from that, but he does take the best part of that, and that becomes part of the blessing and promise of Yaakov. And so I kind of contrast that and compare that to congregations, and the fact that many people go to a congregation and it's made up of people, and there's somebody up front who wants to do all the talking and gets titles and rents the building and all that, and these self-appointed leaders go up there. But at the end of the day, you might end up having to leave that, and you might take the good that's there, and hey, like many congregations, I love to show up and say hi to the people and talk to them and all this and that, but I can't abide with them because of the things that they teach and that they believe. I can try and fellowship with them, but I probably won't, that won't be the congregation that I go to. And I talk a little bit about that and show that contrast of Yaakov, who can go out on his own, and he comes to that point where he realizes, just like Avraham when he had to leave his kindred and his house and his people, that because of his belief, he may have to walk alone with God, and he doesn't put, he's not able to abide with other people a lot of times, and how that's perfectly normal and okay. So for all those people out there who felt compelled to leave the local Messianic congregation or whatnot, hopefully those words will be encouraging, that this is the path that many of the most righteous people in the Word of God and all the stories that we have are people who went out and left. They left their own people and they left their own kind, and Mashiach, wasn't accepted by his own people, and the religious organization that should have accepted him didn't, and he ended up separating himself and going with those people who he could fellowship with and who could fellowship with him. And so that's kind of the concept of the flocks of Lavan, that ultimately you may have to separate yourself or take what is good from what's out there among religion. That's what I found. There's so many things out there, and yet there's so much garbage that's mixed in with it. So you kind of have to take the best of that, just like Yaakov took the best of Lavan's flocks, and stay true to the truth. Next I have, give me children lest I die, and this just goes into this concept of people trying to extract what they want and self-serve, and take, and I'm starting a ministry, and this and that, when really they rent the building, they buy the overhead projector because they like the praise of men, and they like the being self-justified and the power and the titles and all this and that. So I talk a little bit about that. And at the end of the day, it's really about fighting over the fruit. People are fighting over who's got the truth, whose building is it, who started the congregation, who has the best theories, who should be, get XYZ title and all that. And you realize that all of those things are the things of Lavan. All those things are things to leave behind, and just take what's good, which is the truth, out of there and go your way. So that's a summary of my message, Fighting Over the Fruit. If you're interested in listening to the whole message and all the details that I go into, click the link for the full message. Otherwise, I hope this 10-minute summary has been a blessing to you. And hit subscribe. Make sure you like our posts, and then you leave a comment, even if it's just hey, thanks, or whatever, because that makes sure that the algorithms, if posts get liked, then that means that you want to see those posts when I post something in your timeline. And if you don't hit like or subscribe, then those get filtered out and you see less and less over time. So anyway, till next time, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom.